Out in the Cold, Part 2. Lighting the Fire by Esper. Read by the ANY Pony. A truly fine day was blessing the land of Equestria. Celestia's sun hung high in the sky, its light gently radiating down on her subjects. The cloud detail had cleared the sky of all but the smallest, puffiest of clouds, ensuring there was no chance for rain to ruin the day. All in all, it was a perfect summer day, ideal for young lovers to spend lazy hours showing each other their affection. It was unfortunate then that the newest couple in Ponyville was having the first disagreement of their bourgeoisie relationship. "Do we have to tell her?" the blue-pelted pony begged her partner as they lay side by side on the deck that was built in the upper level of Ponyville's library. Her lover, a fellow mayor, her body clad in deep purple, exhaled softly, a quill and parchment hanging in the sky through her magic. This argument had been going on for quite a while, and it was beginning to wear on her mood. "Of course we have to tell her, Trixie. She's my mentor. She deserves to know about us," she stated with finality. Perhaps even just a week ago Trixie would refuse to back down, but things had changed and she had learned something important. To know when to admit defeat. "All right, Twilight, you win," the unicorn conceded to her opponent, and Twilight smiled gently. She turned her eyes to the parchment hanging in the sky, and the quill began to do its work, following its owner's commands. "Dear Princess Celestia, in the time I have spent here in Ponyville, I have learned a great deal about the nature and magic of friendship. Now, by chance, I have learned an important new lesson, one about feelings beyond friendship, the lesson of love. I have fallen for some pony, Princess, and I seek your blessing for our relationship. Her name is Trixie, and she has grown very dear to me. Please, when you are not busy, I would invite her to meet with her. I look forward to your response. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle." It had come a bit of a shock to Trixie when she learned that the princess was Twilight's teacher, and she was definitively worried about what she was going to think. But it was too late for complaints now, because with a final flourish Twilight signed the letter and looked encouragingly at the sulking midnight blue pony beside her. "I'll just take this to Spike so he can send it to the princess. You'll see, Trixie, it will be okay." Trixie nodded weakly and watched as Twilight stood up and trotted into the library proper, leaving her alone. Trixie laid there on the deck, trying to convince herself that everything would be okay. The sun, previously so comfortable to her, seemed to be getting even hotter, beating down on her laid-out form. The bright orbs seemed to be hanging lower in the sky, large and red. The small, puffy clouds had dispersed. "What is taking her so long?" Trixie muttered to herself. Perhaps it was her nerves, but it felt like Twilight had been gone for longer than she should have been. Her brow was starting to dampen with sweat, and she looked up to the sky. The shimmering orb looked even larger than it had a few moments ago. In fact, as Trixie watched, she realized that it was moving right towards her. Trixie let out a squeak of surprise and quickly got to her feet. The sun really was getting closer and closer. She started to pant, feeling light-heated, her eyes wide. The blazing sphere descended close enough that she could almost touch it, and then began to unfold, Trixie letting out a cry, cowering as she was briefly blinded by the blaze. "So, you are the mayor deceiving my student," a booming voice commanded, the voice of a goddess. Trixie forced one of her eyes open to behold a shining cross between Pegasus and Unicorn, glowing with the brightness of a great and terrible desert sun. The leaves of the tree the library resided in starting to burst into flames. "No, it's not like that," Trixie protested, but the goddess glared, the fire and light of a star piercing through the quivering unicorn. I mean... Trixie stuttered, any defense dying in her now parched throat. "Silence!" the goddess of the sun bellowed, causing the wood of the deck to start to splinter and smolder. "I can see right through you, deceiver, trickster. I know of your crimes." Trixie whimpered, the heat starting to overwhelm her, and she weakly lifted her head, seeing that the goddess was no longer alone. She was accompanied by twisted parodies of Twilight's friends. They stared down accusingly at Trixie, the angelic servants of a wrathful goddess. "She humiliated us!" they cried at once, again and again, calling out Trixie's crimes and mistakes, exposing them to dry and burn in the sun. "I'm sorry," Trixie begged, protesting before them, begging for mercy. "Please, I know I made mistakes, but I want to make up for it, please." The goddess that had appeared before Trixie looked scornfully down on her. "For your crimes, for your deceit of my student, I condemn you," the deity commanded, and began to blaze even brighter than before. So bright that Trixie couldn't see anything but light, and she let out a scream as her very being was overwhelmed and seared away. Trixie let out a soft groan as she opened her eyes. It was early in the morning, the sun shining through the window, accusingly washing over the half-awake mayor. She let out a quiet moan and forced herself up, careful not to disturb the two other occupants of the room. Spike, the baby dragon, was curled up in his basket, and Twilight was still asleep in the bed opposite of Trixie. The unicorn felt her cheeks blush slightly as she watched Twilight sleep, her body rhythmically moving up and down in time with her breathing. Trixie felt grateful that she hadn't woken them up as well. He laid back, chiding herself for her overactive imagination. She had been sleeping so well over the past week. Unlike the dreams that had been plaguing her before that fateful night, however, Trixie knew exactly the source and reason of this nightmare. That day was the day that Twilight was going to introduce Trixie to her friends. Trixie flicked her horn and one of her mother's books floated off the bedstand next to her, opening on the page that she had left marked. She could only hope that reading would ease her worry about what was going to happen that day. It wasn't like it was a true introduction to any of them. Throughout the week, Twilight's friends had been popping in and out of the library to check in on her as she helped Trixie convalesce. Each time they had visited, however, Trixie tried to make herself as small as possible, barely responding to questions and never making eye contact. Despite Twilight's reassurances, Trixie was still worried and still felt guilty about how she had treated every pony in Ponyville the last time she was there. Twilight had used the excuse that she was still feeling physically unwell, which was true admittedly, to excuse her lack of sociability. They hadn't even come close to telling them about their relationship yet. Trixie realized that she had read the same lie in a particularly challenging invisibility spell about 7 times and gave up. She quietly slipped out of bed and headed to the mirror. Trixie really was worried about how Twilight's friends would react to her, but it couldn't be delayed any longer. Twilight had insisted that the best thing for her now was to start moving and stop hiding in the library. Trixie herself had to admit that she really was feeling better, as the pony that peered back at her in the mirror proved. Her pelt had regained its sheen, and her hair, while still quite long, was back in order. The cuts and nicks at her legs had mostly healed, and she was gaining weight again, her ribs disappearing back under her body. It was really amazing how much of a difference the rest, comfort, and an attentive partner had made to her. Trixie allowed herself a small blush, looking at the red in her cheeks, and beyond that the slumbering pony that was the cause of it. The best part of the past few days really had been Twilight. Their relationship at this point was less grand and romantic, and more comfortable and kind. It was tender kisses and soft caresses that made the recovering Trixie's body tingle with delight. There would be plenty of time for grand romantic gestures once Trixie was less Twilight's patient and more her partner. For now she was content to spend the evenings lying against the loving mayor as they both read to Midnight's books, the heritage that Trixie had been gifted. She only wished that she could figure out why Twilight had kissed her in the first place. Oh, she knew quite well why Trixie herself had reciprocated the kiss, having accepted the emotion that she had been denying since the night with the Ursa Minor, but Twilight's reasons were still a mystery to her. She wanted to know, but was terrified to ask, as if the act of doing so would break the spell that night had woven around them. Twilight let out a soft groan, dispelling the self-examination that Trixie had been giving herself. She inhaled softly and put on a brave smile, turning away from the mirror and moving over to Twilight's bed, bending down to give her a soft, loving nuzzle. "Good morning, Twilight," she whispered into her ear, pressing fondly against her. "Today's the day, isn't it?" "Trixie?" The purple unicorn blinked warily, trying to clear the morning fuss from her brain. "You don't normally wake up earlier than me." She slowly sat up, returning the gentle nuzzles Trixie was giving her, before looking at her with sudden concern. "Did you sleep all right? You didn't have any more bad dreams, did you?" No, nothing of the sort. Trixie didn't see the need to concern Twilight with that silly dream. "I just woke up early because I'm excited, is all. Big day, go meet your friends, be all happy and nothing bad at all happening, right?" She probably was laying it on a bit sick, and it was clear from the expression on Twilight's face that she wasn't about to buy it for a second. "Right, well," She crawled out of bed. If you're eager and ready, then why don't we get an early start? Applejack should be working in the fields right about now, Twilight said, looking out the window. Even though she wasn't buying into Trixie's false enthusiasm, she wasn't about to let it stop her either. She had carefully devised and scheduled this day so that they would catch each of her friends alone, allowing Trixie to meet and deal with them individually. Trixie had to admit that she was quite thankful that Twilight was such a capable planner. She briefly checked her hair and heaped towards the door. "What about Spike?" Trixie asked, gesturing at the still slumbering baby dragon. "Oh, let him sleep. He's been working extra hard lately with 2 ponies living here," Twilight replied, opening the door to the outside world and waiting for Trixie to catch up with her. "After you." As Trixie passed Twilight, her fellow unicorn leaned in and gave her a reassuring kiss on the cheek that sent those familiar tingles shooting down her spine. Maybe today wouldn't be that bad after all. Halfway to Sweet Apple Anchors, Trixie's brief bout of optimism was nearly blown away from her by a streaking rainbow. "Well, if this isn't the great and powerful Trixie!" Twilight winced slightly at Rainbow Dash, proceeding to smash her carefully laid out schedule to pieces by descending from the clouds to meet them. Rainbow Dash was supposed to be the last one they meet with after Trixie had gained some confidence and forgiveness by meeting with the others whose sense of pride and reaction to that pride being wounded wasn't as strong as Dash's. "Hi, Rainbow Dash," Twilight said warningly, casting a slightly worried glance at Trixie, who had an unreadable expression on her face. Dash smirked playfully, looping circles around the 2 unicorns. "Your friend taken on any more Ursa Minors recently? Maybe that would explain why she's not looking so great and powerful anymore." Rainbow continued to push buttons and Twilight bristled slightly. "Dash?" "You're absolutely right, Rainbow Dash," Trixie interrupted, causing the 2 ponies to blink in surprise, looking at her. "Trixie? Am I?" Rainbow said in a confused voice, and Trixie continued. "Oh, how could I be foolish enough to think that I, Trixie, could possibly match the awesomeness of you, Rainbow Dash," she said in the same theatrical but convincing tone that she had been taken during her performance. "Wait, are you serious? Are you making fun of me?" Rainbow Dash said, clearly looking confused at Trixie's word, an expression shared by Twilight's own. Trixie bowed her head lowly and humbly at Rainbow Dash. "Of course not, Rainbow Dash. You really are the coolest pony in all of Equestria, and I should have never tried to match you. It was only my jealousy. Please, forgive me for trying to embarrass you," Trixie exclaimed, throwing herself dramatically into the dirt. Of course. I can see why you would want to," Rainbow Dash said, her confusion turning into pride as her confidence was fed. "Well, everything turned out right, so I think I can forgive you." She grinned brightly, her wings beating fiercer. "Your new friend is better than I thought, Twilight. I like her." Twilight, looking between the bowing Trixie and the pride-filled Dash, tried to think of what to say and managed only to sputter out a couple of words. "Thanks, Dash." "Well, I woke up early just to meet up with you 2. I think it's time for a nap," Rainbow exclaimed, and before the unicorns could bid their farewells, zipped off into the clouds. Twilight watched her go. "Well, that wasn't too bad," Trixie said, and Twilight blinked, casting a glance at her as she picked herself up off the ground, dusting herself off and smiling. "How did you—" Twilight had been certain that this would be the hardest confrontation. "I was applying to her pride. I really do feel bad for what I did, but I knew that trying to apologize normally wouldn't work," Trixie kept smiling. "Fortunately, I have a lot of practice of bolstering someone's ego. I did it to myself all the time." Twilight paused and giggled. "You put on quite an act." Trixie puffed her chest out with pride, tapping it with a hoof. "I was a show mayor, remember? I thought about putting her name in lights, but that might have been a bit too much." Trixie started walking again, Twilight trotting alongside her, the 2 laughing with one another. Trixie had to admit she felt not just happy, but confident in herself for the first time in a very long while.